Hello Darklings! So today I am here to talk about miniatures I've made. So I did an art doll video a little while ago, I can't remember when, but this is a couple more art dolls and miniatures I've been making. So several months ago I got it into my head that I missed having a wood strip cutter and I wanted to make miniatures because I hadn't done it in a really long time, because that's usually how most of my projects start, which is, hey, remember that thing I like and I just totally forgot about until right this second? How about I do something about that? So it started with a box of craft sticks and a wood strip cutter. I think I had to get this off like eBay or something for like $16. I used to have a big one when I was a kid. It was much bigger than this one and very nice, but I don't know where it went. And I just had one of those nights where I sat there and was like, why can't I remember what happened to that? So this is pretty much like my box of tricks when it comes to making my bookcase necklaces, which if you follow my other social media, you've probably seen me post and try to nab. I make them periodically. They're not difficult to make, but they're very labor intensive. And so I don't do them very frequently. But that's like the main secret to my miniatures, is just this big hefty box of craft sticks. So the first one that I opted to make was in this old whiskey box that I got when I was like 16. And I just had for years and years because it was just a really cool box. I had left the lid somewhere else, but it has like a little slide lid because it's for High West Whiskey, which is a local brewery and distillery, whatever. And so I don't know how well any of this shows up on camera, but there's lots of little tiny books, all of which were made by hand. And down towards the bottom, there's a couple of little tiny maps that I made out of glassine paper, but they're little hand-drawn maps of Ankh-Morpork and the Discworld, because when I made this, I was not quite done reading Discworld, because last year I decided to read the entirety of Discworld in less than 3 months, which is impressive for 40 books. So this was a fun experiment because I didn't really know what I was doing. This is the first time that I was really playing around with doing the books for an actual little tiny library, which is cabinet, whatever this is. So each individual book I make by taking like a normal 8.5 by 11 sheet of like cardstock paper, and I cut them into strips that range from like 1 centimeter to 1.5 centimeters, because for some reason I like doing stuff in centimeters. And then I take the strip and I accordion fold it, so back and forth folding like you would do in elementary school, until it makes like an appropriate thickness for a book, and then take the fancier patterned paper that I would have, and then I'd kind of wrap it around, measure it, and then cut it out and glue it. And so it's just like one small strip of paper wrapped around an accordion folded longer strip of paper, if that makes sense. But they're not complicated to make, but they are tedious, and to make a lot of them takes a long time. So this was my first experiment with it. I hadn't made miniatures in years. I used to make them a lot when I was, I want to say like 11 or 12. I was friends with miniaturists. I went to a miniature store at my family's place in Western New York. And I like tiny things. I don't blame myself for liking tiny things. So I got really carried away with that whole project, and it turned out really nice. I think the second one turned out a little bit nicer. It's just tidier. I like these lanterns because I think they look neat, and I have put art dolls in other lanterns, and the crow brain says, ooh, shiny. So I get the lanterns periodically. Let's see where the on switch is here. Aha! So this idea just came because I had this lantern on hand. It's my little writer's nook. And so we got a little window with shutters, we got outside decoration, and then on the inside, let's see, I don't know if opening the lantern will really make a difference as far as video visibility goes. But inside we do have a little tiny desk with a tiny typewriter and little shelves of books and knickknacks. If you want clear images or have trouble being able to see this, I promise all this stuff is posted on my Instagram and on my Tumblr. But I can't get that closed right now. The tiny typewriter I made out of bits of wood. I do not entirely know how I do this stuff. I just kind of look at the materials I have and then guess at how I can kind of make it. I'm still really new to miniatures and have to kind of just do a bit of a trial and error process. But I look at the strips of wood and the toothpicks and kind of think, how can I put these together into something that resembles this other thing in miniature? These are not exact 1 to 12 scale like most miniatures would be, because I'm just sort of ballparking it. And since most of my measurements are in centimeters, that doesn't really help either. I think this came next. This is a little art doll. Unfortunately, a couple of these were on a shelf above my TV, and a couple of months back there was an earthquake here that took me 6.5 hours to clean up because there's a lot of broken glass, spilled soil, all this fun stuff. And so some things were damaged, like this little lady's little horn was broken. I was trying to make her horns inspired by kudu horns because I grew up with a kudu at my dad's house for some reason. Anyway, this is made out of polymer clay with actual like shorn sheep's wool hair. And there's little speckles on her of glow-in-the-dark paint that I cannot photograph because I am not someone who's fancy and has a DSLR camera, because I am not a photographer. And I think she turned out okay, considering I really do have a lot of difficulty with sculpture. I've never been very comfortable with it. Drawing on paper has always been more comfortable. But I still think that she turned out nice. I was really impressed that the little dome that she was under didn't break despite hitting the floor. So she turned out pretty nice. I feel bad that she's broken, but I'd like to sell her at some point. This one is a little hardier than some of my others, and I made this one after I bought the dome, which is super dusty right now and hard to see through. So this is my little decrepit castle in the autumn woods. The base of it, like the actual castle, the base is cardstock and masking tape and a cardboard mailing tube for the tower. And then I covered it in those like plaster strips that you probably made face masks with, or like masks out of, with straws in your nose at some point. Or maybe I'm just crazy in having that memory. And then painted with acrylic and used like shredded bits of autumn leaves in order to make the tiny autumn leaves. I don't know what scale this is. I just always like the idea of the abandoned castles in the middle of the forest. I think that they just look neat. But at some point I mean to sell that. I'm just really lazy and worry about shipping, so I've been a little bit lax on that. So there's that one. Probably the one that I think turned out the nicest and the one that I was really happy to make was this one. So I found this lantern in the antique mall that I love going to. That's in kind of downtown Salt Lake. And I just thought the lantern was really cool. And the second I saw it, I'm like, I can make miniatures to go in there. And I got super excited. And then I also had it in my storage closet for a 1.5 years, I think, before I actually made this during, like, right before quarantine started where I am. I was out of work for 5 weeks between the earthquake and COVID. And so I had a lot of project time. Oops, let's hope I don't break anything. So I don't know how much of this shows up on video. I really don't. Like I said, please look at the pictures on my other social media. So we got lots of shelves of books and weird little knickknacks. Some of these little knickknacks I've had for a really long time, which is one of the reasons I don't want to sell this. Plus shipping this would be an absolute nightmare. But I've been doing miniatures for a long time, so some of the stuff I've just had, and then some of it are like weird little travel gifts, like the little kitty in there my dad got in Japan. And then I used like just like scrapbooking paper for this brick wall in the back. But otherwise, that back wall is made out of cardboard. And I did sit there and make every single little individual book because I'm crazy. It took hours. Like I said, not difficult, just very, very labor intensive. Because I love to suffer. All right, and then this one, which I can't take the dome off for because I didn't measure quite right, because this is a narrower dome than I expected when I started working on it, is my little fairy hill. So I might have mentioned in the past that Holly Black is one of my favorite authors. I read the Spiderwick Chronicles and her modern fairy tale series at a very formative age of my like preteen, early teens, and her writings influenced my writing more than any other artist. And I recently got super stressed out and binge read all of her books in less than a week, because sometimes it's like that and people think I'm kidding when I tell them I read like crazy. So we got a little fairy hill. I probably am not going to be able to get this close enough for you to be able to see inside the little cavern there with all the tiny cutouts of little fae people and a tiny throne and banquet tables and stuff. I don't think that's going to show up on video. You can look at my other social media for that. So the base of the hill is made out of masking tape and aluminum foil and plaster strips. And I just kind of kept layering it around up and up and up until I had this hill shape, which I then covered in like 6 different paints and many different textures. And then ended up adding all this fake moss and grass and stuff afterward, after those like miniature models, because you can get this stuff from Michael's because it's a craft store. And a lot of hot glue. I don't usually use hot glue. I was using like miniaturist specific glue for my other projects, but this one was hot glue because the other stuff, it's tacky, but it doesn't dry quickly. And it's not as good as holding stuff the same way that hot glue is. I don't like the little stringiness of hot glue, so I don't use it very often, but I still have tons of it. So this was just kind of a fun project. When I actually put the dome over it, it's wedged in there so tight that if I lift up the dome, the entire inside of the little hill comes with it, so can't show it off. I put little tiny daubs of glow-in-the-dark paint on the inside, sporadically, of the dome, so if I let this sit in full light and then take it into a dark room, it looks like it has little stars or little will-o'-the-wisps, whichever you choose to look at it. So that one was kind of fun. It's a little more chaotic and strange than the others, because I didn't really, again, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just really good at making it seem like I do. The last one to show off here is my worm friend. He is a worm, and he is my friend. This one is one of the most foolish projects I've ever done. So the craft foam that you might have used in middle school or elementary school or something, that like weird, squishy, pliable, thin sheets of foam, is primarily what he's made out of. His main body is felt stuffed with cotton stuffing with a wire spine. His legs are made out of polymer clay. His head's made out of the craft foam with texturing of hot glue and beads, and then painted. The inside of his mouth is painted too. And then he has this little faux fur spine, which I stuck up so that it all flows the same direction, a little tidier, with watered down Mod Podge. And then I took one strip of the craft foam for his stomach, and then he has all these little scales that my dumbass cut out individually and glued with E6000 glue, which took 2 days. I'm not wise. And he turned out really cool, and he has feathers around his head, and he's kind of posable. He's not perfectly posable, because I don't know what I'm doing, but he is kind of posable, and he's a little bit more posable than more or less all of my other art dolls, and he's definitely the biggest, and ended up being way bigger than I thought he was going to be when I first started working on it. But I'm quite proud of him, and it seems like everybody slept on the posts I made of him on my other social media, so I figured that YouTube would appreciate my worm friend. And I do say worm with a Y, as in he is a dragon. And he's inspired kind of by lindworms and whatnot, except he has too many legs. He has 6 legs instead of 2, so he's not a proper lindworm. But anyway, hopefully people are at least somewhat amused by my ridiculous project skills and my scatterbrained tendency to work on too many things, because I can never just be one particular kind of artist. Anyway, you can ask questions that I can't guarantee answers for, but till next time, Darklings.